Good afternoon. Welcome to the Kensington Corner. We are here at the Rose in lovely Lawrence, Kansas with Andrew Claypool and Jeff, of course.
Yeah, hi, everybody.
Andrew, how are you doing?
Doing good.
Good.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, definitely.
Really pleased to have you on with us today.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I'm excited. Always love an opportunity to talk to individuals about what I'm doing and to kind of gain a little bit of a perspective of what the outside community might have on what I'm doing.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's a great opportunity to kind of check in with how I'm being perceived and how I can do things better.
Absolutely. Well, I will admit this is my first time in here, but I've heard a lot of great things from Tom about you. He swears by you, so
I do.
You might be seeing me in here eventually.
Okay, great.
So
Let's do it.
Yeah, definitely. Andrew, do you want to go ahead and give everybody a background about what you do?
Sure. I'm owner and operator of the Rose in Lawrence, Kansas, and primarily my work is through the healing arts, and massage therapy is a part of that. Also incorporate energetic healing, and the main form that sort of takes is through Reiki, which is a Japanese form of natural healing. And through the years I've been doing healing arts of one type or the other for about 15 years, and so it's really kind of hard to define real clear and crisp lines as far as what I'm doing or what will be involved. But most people come in for a massage, but a lot of times they're feeling something in their body that tells a little bit of a story about some other things that may need to be addressed or recognized. And so that's when it's nice to have that opportunity to incorporate some energetic clearing or just some checking in. And it makes for, I think, and I hope, a unique experience for people who are coming in. And maybe they thought they were going to get a massage, but maybe they walk out and say, wow, I feel like a brand new person.
Yeah, way better.
I feel transformed.
Yeah.
So,
well, one of the big things for me when I started as far as massage therapy, it really started in Alaska, where there's a huge Asian community up there, and they're really big on natural healing, using nature as a source of like getting rid of mental stress and mental things like that. And that was one of the big things, is that I come in, if I have something going on with me, but a lot of times it's a stress reducer for me as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you take things back to a source point, I've always believed in taking individuals and taking myself back to the very basics of what it means to be a human being. And a lot of times that has to do with the breath. Am I breathing? How am I breathing? Is it shallow chest breathing? Am I using my diaphragm to breathe? Am I drinking water? There's a great book. Well, at least I hear it's a great book. I don't read a whole lot of books, but I get a lot of great suggestions of reading books. But the title was, I believe, You're Not Sick, You're Thirsty. Yep. So, some of these basic elements of being a human being, we all need to breathe. And if we breathe consciously, we can start to restore our health, start moving energy around. And if we're drinking water and we're keeping track of, are we allowing ourselves this universal fluid that our body requires for all kinds of communications to happen and processes to happen. So if we're breathing, we're drinking water, how much closer can we get to nature than that?
Right.
The earth is breathing, it's living in cycles, it's flowing, it's damp, it's alive, And so I think getting back to nature is a great metaphor for kind of remembering what it means to be a human being.
Yeah, definitely. In my notes, I actually wrote down getting back to our roots, because that's one thing I think I was talking about. We've talked about this several times about social media and technology, and how while they aren't necessarily bad, they're not good either in certain contexts. And I think one thing is that it's crazy how when you get into nature and you actually just going for like a walk in the woods will make you feel that much better. And so the one thing that I was hitting off what you said right there is that water. Jeff and I talked about this a lot. It was probably 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah,
we were talking about. I asked Jeff one day. I was like, "How much water do you think you take in, man?" And what did you say?
I said probably 100 ounces a day.
Right. Which is, I mean, everyone thinks they do, right? And so, of course, I was like, dude, there's no way. I don't think you do. And he was like, oh, I totally do. And he went back and he counted and he came back like a couple days later and he's like, man.
About half of that.
He was like,
on a good day.
Yeah. He's like, I'm not. And but he kills it now. He probably drinks more than I do.
You know, that's a really great point that you bring up, is that, like, you know, we tend to complicate things so much, and like we can really make a lot of major improvements in our lives just by focusing on these very basic things that we overlook. Like you spoke about breathing. Like that's one of the things I found out for like my mental state. Like, because I mean, I have a tendency to get myself kind of like worked up, but you know, just like you said, embracing these very basic things, just taking a deep breath, breathing with purpose, I guess is kind of how I would think of it. Is, you know, it has such a major impact. It's such a simple thing, but it's like, I literally had to teach myself how to do that again. Now, when you're kind of going through your introduction, one of the things I'm really curious about is was there a specific event that kind of got you interested in your career now, or was it just kind of you kind of ended up on that path? Is there a story behind it at all? Is what I'm curious about.
Yeah, there's definitely a story. You know, fortunately and unfortunately, some stories are stories that the more you try to escape them or pretend that they're not there, the more they kind of rattle and shake you. And so for me, you know, growing up, I always felt like I was kind of an introspective kid. You know, got into high school, and I sort of thought that maybe there was another side to reality or existence. And, you know, I would love to, you know, sit and, you know, talk philosophy with my friends, or, you know, when people were kind of doing other things, I was kind of looking around. I felt like I was kind of watching the world go by. And I don't know, maybe every teenager does that, but I began to realize that maybe there was something a little bit different with me, because I just sensed that there was something else there that I wasn't being told about. And so what happened for me, when I'd be, you know, in high school, I'd be sitting around with a group of friends, you know, and we'd all be kind of chatting in a circle and talking about our day or whatever it was. And the person I'd be sitting next to, you know, I'd be thinking about their right ankle, you know. And there'd be this little thing that would just say right ankle, right ankle, right ankle, right ankle. And I was like, what in the heck is that, you know? And it was like there was conversations going on, but there was another conversation in the background for me. And of course, I'm just kind of, you know, minding my own business and kind of listening to this voice in my head thinking, okay, well, this is interesting. And then eventually the person talking would say, you know, they'd kind of roll up their pant leg and say, yeah, I wrecked on my skateboard. And something would just kind of shift inside my body like, okay, what was that? You know, and then I kind of began to realize that there was something else kind of going on, kind of an extrasensory perception that was happening. Now, a lot of times in the healing arts community, you know, anybody who has a really good heart and cares about people can go through the training, can develop, you know, their ability to perceive many different things, you know. And I believe that there are some people who are sort of kind of made to do this work.
Right.
And it took me so long, seemingly, to really embrace that in myself. That, yes, this is a gift. No matter how hard I try to talk myself out of it,
right,
or pretend that I'm not an authority on it, sometimes you're just giving gifts that it's sort of your responsibility to step into those and to share those with the community. Once you understand them to a point where you can teach them or share them, I think as an individual, we all sort of have a responsibility that when we find those gifts that we then can share them to our fellow humans, companions, and all forms of life. So, just sort of backtrack a little bit, those occurrences were more and more frequent. And then I realized that they were kind of coexisting with these dream states that I would have. So after I would experience something like that, I would always have a nightmare that night. And it was the strangest thing and completely terrifying for a lot of years. I would hear this loud sound, like someone pounding on a door. Toom, toom, toom. And I mean, I was like 16 years old, and I'd wake up, and I could still hear this sound. And I could almost feel it too. It was like an immense weight, like an elephant walking on a thread of silk. You know, like there's something incredibly just unsupportive about this experience. I can't really hold it inside my body. I'd wake up, I remember going down and I'd turn on like Ricky Lake or something, 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, give me something that's normal that I can kind of get back into my body with. And that followed me around for several years. And it wasn't until probably I think about 17 or 18 years old. And finally, after one of those episodes, finally it stopped. And I entered this dream, which now I understand. A friend of mine had explained to me that, that loud sound is oftentimes a precursor to like a lucid dream experience.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so at the time, it all went quiet, and I was sort of watching myself walking, in the forest. I could, I was kicking leaves up, and I was walking along this little stream, and ended up following it and just kind of watching myself from above. And it ends up leading me to this huge expanse of water, and it was kind of a nightscape, and the water's just turning, and it's alive, and it's purple and blue, and it's like a full moon night, And I look up into the sky, and there's this huge triangle in the sky. It's the outline of a triangle, like a full moon, just like blasting behind this triangle. And I remember just thinking, like, oh my gosh, like, this is something profound. I have no idea what it means, but I'm just kind of following it, And eventually I kind of go up into this symbol or this triangle, and I'm sitting with this figure that's kind of, cloaked, and, there's the eyes of this figure are kind of liquid, like green and red, and it's obviously not a human form, but I started to get this, like, almost like this telepathic communication that, and he was telling me, or this thing was telling me that this is a huge part of your life. And right now it's very, very overwhelming and very confusing, but I want you to remember this. This is a huge part of who you are and why you're here. And of course I wake up and I'm completely terrified. But I felt like some kind of connection or communication had happened with a higher part of myself, or just something that was saying, this is really intense, hold on to it, and sort of take heart that one day this is going to make sense and it's going to be a huge part of your life. And to continue for a little bit further along, the second sort of half of that story was I was on the couch, and my sister and my mom were at this psychic fair. And my sister bursts into the house, and she wakes me up off the couch, and she says, Andy, you have to come to the psychic fair. There's this lady, and Mom put all these pictures of all of his kids out on the table, and this lady was holding a crystal over us, and this pendulum was moving when it came over you. And anyway, she gave us free passes to come get you, and I'm like, I'm like 18 years old. I'm like, okay, whatever, Julie, okay, I'll go with you. And I end up going there, and I walk into this place, and like, here's this lady, and I see her, and all of a sudden, like, everything else in this huge like conference center just kind of gets fuzzy, and like, here's this woman. And I walk over and I introduce myself. I sit down. My mom, my sister are sitting next to me, and they're kind of on the edge of their seats, And I just woke up from a nap, But this lady, there's all kinds of stuff going on behind her. I'm seeing like little sparks of light, and I'm hearing all kinds of like background chatter. I'm like, okay, this is really kind of amping up. And this lady is like really excited to see me. And she's like, can I see your hands? And I said, sure. I put my hands out into her hands, and my right hand starts getting really hot. And she says, kind of to my sister and my mom, she's like, he doesn't know this, but he's actually healing me right now. And I pull my hands back really quick. I kind of put them up in the air. I'm like, okay, this is a little bit too much,
Right.
I'm thinking like, I'm really going to have some crazy dreams tonight, And but basically, she kind of painted a picture and kind of did a little bit of dream interpretation. And that was the first time I really kind of had somebody who could speak a language or understand what I was saying, and how I was, I've been a healer many times in past lives, and as hard as that was all to kind of take in, I was still kind of like, okay, I'm following. I'm not comfortable at all. It's very overwhelming, and my body's like trembling and shaking because I don't understand it.
Right.
But it's kind of making sense. So I'm kind of like nodding my head. And, that was a very pivotal part of my journey. And then years later, I ended up learning Reiki. And when I went to massage school, it was at Pinnacle Career Institute, and their logo is actually a triangle. So when I came up to the place, I was like, okay, this is the place I'm supposed to be, It's so funny how, the universe or that higher self is always kind of giving you little winks and nudges, and you just kind of follow the breadcrumbs. So I knew I was on the path again. And at that point, I felt a little bit more comfortable in my body. I was more comfortable kind of exploring those areas. But it's always been an indicator for me that I'm on the verge of some kind of growth or expansion when I feel that my energy is just kind of rattling around inside my body. Like, what I know to be true, I need to be a little bit bigger. I need to expand my consciousness, expand my awareness, because I'm kind of getting uncomfortable with this growth, this growth edge. And so I've always been curious about that. When my body starts to kind of rattle around a little bit, I start thinking, okay, don't be afraid of that. Go into that, see what's there. And a lot of times afterwards, there's this nice, calm, extra space to breathe, extra space to move. So that's a very brief story, but it was very clear to me that at some point I needed to acknowledge this huge signal beacon in my life. As much as I wanted to avoid it, the more I avoided it, the more it would kind of say, hey, Andy, it would knock a little louder, rattle inside my body. I used to think I had like some kind of neurological thing going on. My hands would shake in high school, and I'd have this like intense energy running down my arms, and it kind of get stuck in my hands. So actually, when I learned Reiki, that helped out so much.
Was able to release that energy?
Yeah, I was able to release that energy, give it a conduit, give it a direction, and that was a huge point. It was when I first learned Reiki. It was like, okay, this energy that I'm pulling in from the earth, from the universe, from all around me, now I can do something with that, and give it a channel, give it a conduit for a healing intention, and I don't have to hold on to that. Right. I don't have to be, pushed and pulled around by it. So anyway, yeah, that's, and it used to be that I couldn't tell that story without my teeth just chattering, because it was such an intense time.
Yeah.
So
do you still ever have those dreams at all, or no? With the knocking?
I've never had the loud pounding, thankfully. But what it has offered me is a nice little bit of what I really love to say, my personal experiential knowledge. And that's something that I can share with somebody else.
Right.
And a lot of times when I share that, someone's like, oh my gosh, like that happened to me. Or sometimes I get people who come in here who see things, or they sense things, or they feel things, and they're terrified, and nobody knows. Everybody thinks they're crazy.
Right.
Like you're gonna think I'm bat bleeping crazy, but I talked to my grandmother who passed away, and I'm like, hey, that's extraordinary. Let's have a conversation.
Right.
So for me, I really didn't have like a place I could go to say like, I'm feeling all these things. I don't know what they mean. My mom, she was really sweet. She would say, Andy, I don't know what to do, how to help you. I don't know why you're experiencing these things, but I want to support you. And so, she would get me a book on, Reiki or healing or something like that. Or she would talk to astrologers, or say, hey, maybe you could talk to this person and tell them about your dreams, And I was really thankful, my mom, she didn't really flip out, She was like, wow, this is incredible. I don't know what it means, but let me see if I can support you. So,
right.
But yeah, there's a lot of people, I think, who have these abilities, but there's not a really great place to go where you can have conversations about it. Mm-hmm. You can get online and Google it, but
it does so much, though.
A slippery slope,
Yeah.
But when you can actually talk to a real life human being who has had scary experiences, and a lot of times I have found in sharing my experience, it's very common for healing artists to have had these profound kind of life-shaking events or periods of time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a near-death experience. Sometimes it's just a loss of a dear one, and then being able to sense their presence or whatever, or seeing colors or, any number of things. And so I think these things are alive in all of us.
Right.
And sometimes they wake up. Sometimes they flash in a dream to us. Sometimes we can be still enough, like if we're in nature, to realize like, wow, I feel like that tree is like giving me healing, right? I feel like that wind is blowing at a particular time when I'm having a particular thought about a particular thing. And you start kind of stringing these things all together, and all of a sudden you think, wow, there's something magical happening right now.
Yeah.
And if you allow yourself to say, what is this? If you allow yourself to be curious and to allow your imagination to kind of help be that language that it can speak through. I mean, imagination is one of the oldest forms of medicine that there is. Whether we believe we're getting well or getting worse, it's likely to be true and to come to fruition. And so imagery is very important, but we're kind of taught to, it's just your imagination, trees don't talk, and, birds, they just kind of fly around and they're kind of pretty to, listen to their song. But, those of us who, for whatever reason, are returning to ourselves or returning to nature for healing, a lot of times we're given these glimpses through these windows of how everything around you is communicating.
Right.
It's sort of based on how deeply are we listening, or how much are we allowing ourselves to listen.
One of the things, Jeff and I have talked about this, is that I don't know how often or if you've ever been to like any ancient ruins at all, but that's like one of the things. When I was in Belize, some of the Mayan ruins were cool, but I went to the Angkor Wat a few years ago, and just there's something about that area where it feels there's something flowing there. Like even as you're walking, you're feeling something going. And I didn't really feel it in like Babylon or anything like that, but there were certain areas in life that I've been through where you're somewhere. I'm sure it happens in the States somewhere. I'm sure people have done that, but there's certain places where you kind of just feel different. You don't feel like you do on a normal day. And the Angkor Wat was it for me. I know we talked about that.
Absolutely. You can find, you're talking about kind of your experience with Angkor Wat. I've had that even around here. Just like there are places that you go. Like there's a field about 10 miles south of where I grew up, and if you've never been there, it's impossible to find. Right. It's just a gravel road through a meadow, basically. And I remember the first time I was just out driving around by myself, probably blowing off some steam because that's what you do when you're a country kid. Like you just go out and drive and get everything off your mind. And I remember the first time I ever pulled up there, and I stopped in the middle of the road. I got out of my car and I said, "This might be the most perfect place on earth," and it's literally like right down the road from where I've spent my whole life. But I think I find your whole story super interesting because I know from my own personal experience, a lot of times we as people tend to kind of reject these these things that we can sense, but maybe can't explain. And at least I think in my experience, I've been there where I've been in a place where, like I said, I sense something very, very real, very spiritual, powerful, and because I can't just conceptualize it, or I can't place it within my own I can't place it within the context of my own experience, that you kind of like tend to like push it away instead of embrace it. Sure. And I can only imagine that kind of your experience going through that, just like your profession is really cathartic for you as well, that you are embracing this this very spiritual side of yourself, and I find that completely amazing.
Oh, thanks.
One thing you said I want to ask, because I was curious about it. Jeff thinks I'm crazy, which is fine. But one of my big things, I'm a huge believer that dreams are different dimensions. And so I want to go to Peru and do DMT one day. I just want to do it. I just want to do some psychedelics and just see what happens. I'm gonna force him to go with me. He doesn't know yet. I've been throwing these things out like, hey, if I just buy you a ticket to Peru, will you come with me without the psychedelics? And then we get there, I'll throw it in some soup or something. Yeah. But you said that you had been a healer in previous lives. Now, do you believe in reincarnation, or do you believe in different realms, dimensions, or both?
Yeah. I want to backtrack just a little bit. That may kind of help segue into this. And, there are those places that we enter into in our physical realm where it's kind of like, it's palpable. The energy of the place is palpable. Something happened here. Something sacred is here. And we feel that, right? We don't see it.
Right.
It's not something that our eyes are going to be able to perceive. Mm-hmm. It's not something that our mind is going to be able to tell us what it is or identify. And so one of the huge sort of shifts that can happen is feeling your way through life. And even starts by changing the way you speak. Now, I think this, or I don't think that that's possible, or I think that this is this way, or I think this is the truth. And switching that word think with feel gives you a little bit of a different lens to look through. Like, let's not think about this. Let's see how this feels. So you can get into situations where you take a moment. How does this feel? I feel like I like this place. I feel like there's something about this place. Or I feel like we need to go this way. Or I feel like we need to go that way. Or I feel like maybe I should X, Y, and Z. So you get into the pattern of checking in. How do you feel? Because a lot of times we're heavy in the head and light in the body, or light in the heart. And some of the really great indigenous cultures, particularly in the Great Plains area, the Lakota people, talk about a little bit about the Red Road. And my very vague understanding of that, someone explained to me a little bit about that, and that was that the Red Road can in one way be described as the path from the mind to the heart. And so when you're walking that red road, you're walking a road that is governed by the heart. You're finding a path that has a good heart, and you're following that road. And as far as our dream states, and psychedelics for that matter, like I probably have no business doing anything like that. I feel like I'm already like living an extraordinary life experience as it is. But I think there are many different realms that exist and that coexist with our current realities. And so a lot of times when you're standing somewhere and you feel connected to it, a lot of us think that, or there's an assumption in my mind that a lot of us think that time is linear.
Right.
And so that's really helpful for the mind. But what's really helpful for the heart, and it makes more sense to probably more parts of ourselves if we would allow ourselves to perceive time, which time is kind of we've invented time, is that time is not linear. It's sort of helical, or it's a circle. It's three-dimensional. It goes everywhere. And so there's a big part of me that believes that it's very possible that I'm living right now, and I'm also experiencing a lifetime, many lifetimes to go, and many lifetimes to come. And so I think there's those moments where we get that deja vu, where we get that feeling like we've been there before, but how is that possible? Right. Across the world for the first time? Maybe it's because our ancestor was connected to that. Well, was it our ancestor or was it us? Is there a difference between our ancestors and ourselves? Is there a difference between myself and my daughter, or myself and my grandchildren? Where's that line drawn? Well, when we leave our physical bodies and the limitations that we have here on this physical plane, a lot of times we imagine entering a place where none of that is as significant, and we are with our loved ones, and we are with maybe our descendants and our ancestors all together, and we're all having that experience. So I think dreams in a way are really, really powerful like that as well, where there are fewer limitations, and the more you invest in your dreams and you allow yourself to say, I remember, many times in my life where I hit a roadblock and I would say, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I'm freaking out. And I didn't know who to pray to necessarily, but I would say, I need some help. Give it to me in a dream. Give it to me in a way that I can understand it. And a lot of times I would end up having a very profound dream that night. And some of that was based on the point in which I felt like I was at. I felt like I had gone to sort of the brink of my capacity to further exist. Now, whether that meant that I was feeling like maybe I was going to take my life, or maybe I couldn't do it anymore. I think there's something about getting to that point that really kind of awakens a part of you that says, hey, it's kind of like a survival thing. Like, is this my higher self saying, hey, listen, I know things are really crazy right now, but trust me, if we can just get to this other landing spot, it's going to be okay. So a lot of times I would envision a higher version of myself, the me that had made it or reached enlightenment or whatever it was. And I took comfort in knowing that I could call on that person and they could reach a hand down when I was climbing that mountain and say, hey, I need you to climb too, but once you reach my hand, I can kind of help you up over here to this landing spot. And so I think when you allow yourself to say, my dreams have meaning, my dreams have purpose, my dreams can be a form of communication between myself and my higher self, or myself and another level of existing, you open that pathway. Just like, runes or other types of divination or forecasting or just metaphors, different languages, the more you have access to different ways of articulating realities, then that's really helpful. It's like a tool. So your unconscious mind or your subconscious mind can say, hey, he's studying runes. Let's put this symbol here, because he'll understand that, and he's really passionate about that right now. And it's a little breadcrumb for him to follow. Likewise, if you really start going into dream journaling, I think you're tapping into a deeper part of yourself that can say, hey, I can offer you some insights. I'm glad you came. It's like, if you don't knock on the door, if you don't ask for help, you're likely not going to get it.
Yeah.
But if you go out and if you seek it and your mind is open, then you have all kinds of opportunities. But you first have to have those tools so that those tools can be used to communicate to you. And so the realm of the invisibles is very interesting and ecstatic and amazing and magical. And the more you invest in it, the more it can communicate to you. Whether it is that you have a favorite song, a favorite animal, a favorite relative, an ancestor, anything. All of a sudden, when you build those relationships on a constant basis, talking to your ancestors in the morning, or paying reverence to a certain plant or flower that grows in your garden, or maybe you're a painter and you like to paint a particular animal that that follows you around, or whatever it is. Now, when you're out in the world, they can give you clues. I'm really not sure if I should invest in this higher education, or I'm not really sure if I should have this surgery. I'm not really sure if I'm making the right decision about X, Y, or Z. Now that you have these allies, these companions that you've developed this relationship with, that you understand and they understand you, sometimes they can give you a little hint. They can kind of say, they can show up and they can say, hey, this feels good. This feels right. Why don't you look more into this? Or they can say, this doesn't, try something else. And so you're giving yourself a huge expanse of resources.
Yeah.
When you look outside what's in the physical world right in front of your face that you can hold in your hand, or that you can smell, or that you can see. When you start diving into these other realms of the dream world, or possibilities of past lives or future lives, boy, life really gets interesting and it really expands.
Yeah.
And you feel like, at least I feel like, I have so many choices, and it goes from feeling like I'm living a limited life to I'm living in an infinite universe with infinite possibilities. And so that's kind of a nicer feeling.
Absolutely.
Way nicer feeling. Yeah.
You said something way back at the start of that that really resonated with me. I don't know if Tom told you, but like our very first episode was about mental health. Him and I are both, really huge advocates for it. And you said something that like was basically me to a T. And you said that we get so busy trying to rationalize everything that's going on that we don't actually take the time to feel what's going on in our lives. And like I can say from my own personal experience, like having gone through therapy, that like that is, I mean, maybe the single most important thing I learned in that process was that you just need to learn to be in the moment and accept your feelings and embrace your feelings. And because when you don't do that, you just like, I guess the thing I would compare it to is like everything in your life just kind of goes mute and gray, and I think that's such an excellent point. No need to really elaborate. I just wanted to let you know, I think that's such in my mind, such an insightful and powerful thing. Yeah.
One of the, I think we talked about this before with my dreams, but one of the things that I found interesting about that, I call it the other dimension, but we'll call it other world, is one thing that I have found in life that I tend to do now is I will see people. And if you ever see somebody and you say, man, I know that person. You've never met them before, but you know them. One thing that I have made a point to do is that I'll sit and I'll think and I'll be like, man, they were in like a dream when I was like 7 years old, and I'll go talk to them. And usually something good comes from that. Or I'll see somebody that I've passed in the street that's been in like a nightmare. And I'll be like, man, like it's just weird to me how, one, I don't understand it, obviously, but when you talk about deja vu and the dream world and things like that, it is, to me, I try to rationalize this. Did I know them in a previous life? Is it just a dream world thing? Is it like a whole nother reality that I'm living at the same time that they're part of my like reality? And that whole love at first sight, when you talk about that, there are certain people in life that you see, and I don't think that you get feelings for them immediately, but there's some kind of affectionate connection there. And for me, I always am like, man, I wonder like if I was married to that person, like 1,000 years ago, I wonder if that was me, I don't even know her, and so it's really, it's interesting to hear you speak about it, because these are conversations that Jeff and I have all the time, that we're just like, we're crazy. We're insane.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah. That reminds me of something that my uncle Jamie Rich, if he ever listens to this, thank you, Jamie. He's been a mentor of mine on my sort of healing arts career, and just as a young man growing up, he kind of described to me at one point in time, and this is kind of a way that my mind was kind of able to understand some of these deeper concepts, and that was that, in life we have these sort of these contracts, with these different people. Sometimes it's a contract that lasts, 5 seconds. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, 5 months, 5 years, 5 lifetimes.
Right.
We don't know how long these contracts are going to be for, but a lot of times when someone comes into our life, if we're conscious and aware of our surroundings and how we're feeling and sensory perceptions, and sometimes we can say, whoa, where do I know this person from? And we don't necessarily have to try to figure that out, but if we recognize, like, okay, I know I need to show up for this person for at least 5 seconds, at least 5 minutes. Something, I don't know what, I don't have to know necessarily what, something's telling me to show up for this. Am I going to answer that call? Am I going to say hello? Am I going to see what's there? And so I think that's really important too. Sometimes we try to figure it out, and it's fun to play around with it, and it's great to be open to all the possibilities.
Right.
And for me, like when I met my wife, she walked in to my life, and I thought, whoa. And it was like she came in with another person, and I was like, okay, something just walked into the room. I don't know what, but I know I'm going to pay attention to what's happening right now. And not to go into that story because it's a beautiful, magical story that's,
by all means, jump right in.
But, something said, it's almost like someone said, your life is never going to be the same.
Right.
Something has just walked into your life. And so
I imagine
that doesn't
that
happen very often, but
I imagine that's how Jeff felt when he saw me walking down the steps.
Exactly.
My life's never going to be the same.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it hasn't. In a bad way.
For better or worse, your life is
exactly
never gonna be the same. So I think a big part of that is just honoring that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What's here? I'm going to show up for this. And sometimes it's messy and it's confusing and you don't know what the hell you're doing, and you learn from that. But ideally, you get to that point in your life where, I have a tattoo of a crane on my arm. And part of my experience in life was that I was really wanting to embody the energy of this crane. The crane kind of stands in the water and doesn't look like it's doing much. It's standing on one leg sometimes. But that crane is watching everything that goes by in that stream. There's nothing that goes by that crane that it doesn't see. And that crane is incredibly present to opportunities that are going by. It's conserving its energy. It's not flailing about trying to, my friend Kyle Rogers, he's kind of a bear. Sometimes bears will just jump in the water, and they'll grab any fish they can get their hands on. But, the crane is a little more subtle. But at one point, it was really helpful for me to envision that, because I wanted to be present in my life and conscious in my life so that when opportunities did come by, because when that fish comes by, that crane
snatches.
Absolutely.
Very rarely misses.
I've often wondered that in my life, like how many of those moments have you just like literally like drove right, like have I walked right by?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm so focused on something that maybe doesn't even matter really in the big scheme of things.
Yeah.
And that's I think visually that's really I really like that as well. Just kind of thinking about that, like you're there and you're that idea of conserving your energy, but also being in the moment. And I think that's one of the things actually that like really stands out to me, like moving back to Lawrence and going back to school now, is like I see, because I kind of am that type of person. Like I'm that person that sees a lot. I've kind of always got my head up. I see who's around me, those sorts of things. And I see a whole generation of people that are like just
head down,
oblivious.
Yeah.
Oblivious, head down, like don't know. And it's, like I said, I'm not trying to say like I'm some sort of enlightened person, because I'm not, but like I'm conscious of that at least. And I don't see how people live their lives like that. And it's just, it's really odd to me, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of the things, like when I meditate, one of the things that you try to do is just be aware of your surroundings, be aware, and it's the one thing that I always tell myself when I meditate is throughout the day I want to be more aware of my surroundings, and I'm horrible at it. I'm all the time. I'll be on my phone, or especially today with how our assignments are due online and everything, we have to be on the computer all the time. Doing any type of schoolwork is basically online now, or at least typing on the computer and doing it. One thing that is hard for me is that how to separate myself from what we have in life now to try to come back to a more, not even like primal, but a more absolute human, and that's hard. I believe that there's a way that we've coped with technology and guided our way through it, but they also, studies show that technology increases stress, increases anxiety, increases a lot of things. I mean, a lot of the young suicides we have now are due to online bullying and things like that, and a whole different a construct that we've made in our own minds of what we think our life should be like. That's Instagram, social media, we talked about this before. It kind of builds a life that, not that it's not true and not attainable, but it's not like that all the time. Life's not that all the time. And one of the big things that I wanted to do here lately, I was telling, I'm going to Italy here in a couple months. I really want to get out and just be away from everything for a while. And that's so hard to do in the life that we live today. Mm-hmm. It's just hard just to disappear.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that, it sounds like you have an understanding of the effects that technology has or possibly has on yourself and other human beings. And I think it is a very real thing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there tends to be, in my opinion, a correlation between the further we go into a lot of these technologies, the further away from ourselves we're getting, and the further away we're getting from that essence energy. So what I mean by that is that I prescribe to an idea that when children are born, they sort of come into the world as a 360-degree ball of light. Right. They can perceive things. They can do all kinds of magical things. And as we grow as little ones, we're shown the world and how the world works. And depending on our surroundings, depending on the people who are raising us or our environments, we're learning quite abruptly what we can and what we cannot do, what is real and what is not real. And we start losing quite a bit of that, the ability to perceive with our entire beings. And we're to fall in line with what it means to be a human being. Not what it means to be a ball of light and to run and play and get covered head to toe with mud and see fairies and want to create all kinds of imaginative things with whatever it is that's around us. And a lot of times it has to do with going outside and playing and just being one with nature. So a lot of times we come into this aspect of our life where we're becoming adults or young adults, and if we're lucky, we have a little piece of that of that 360-degree ball of light left, and then that's kind of sometimes that happens when you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s, and you realize, oh gosh, like I want to get back to that complete 360-degree ball of light that believed in anything was possible, that believed in the magic and everything. So we, a lot of times, if we're diligent, we'll spend sort of the rest of our lives trying to get back to where we were. And there's absolutely no way to replace being in the wild.
No, yeah.
Being around undomesticated water.
Yeah.
Water that doesn't come through a pipe or out the shower head or that is dammed or whatever. And so we get further and further away from feeling the earth under our feet, hearing sounds of nature. And sometimes we fool ourselves and say, well, we're planting, 5 million trees and we're replacing all of the trees that we cut down. And well, it's not that easy. Nature doesn't work in, mathematical, well, sometimes it does, but it doesn't work in that kind of, there's a lot more to that.
Right.
We're talking about ecosystems, we're talking about fungi, we're talking about microorganisms, we're talking about communications that are happening with a huge diversity of life. And it's not about just plugging and planting trees to restore nature or to restore habitat any more than it is, trying to do that to your own physical body. Like, oh, here's this, you're missing a finger, here's your finger back, or, it's like there's this web. There's a web of life that is out there and that flows through us. And there's no replacing that, And so you have to find that strand and kind of follow it back to the origin, back to nature, back to the root of yourself. And the more we deplete our access points to that wild outdoor, we're limiting ourselves more and more. Some of the most profound experiences I've ever had in my entire life were when I was in an earth medicine apprenticeship in Silver City, New Mexico, in the Gila Wilderness. And we would go out, and we were gone for 10 days at a time, and no really no access to your phone or anything like that. And it was just, you woke up, we went out into the wild, we sat with these plants, and we observed all kinds of things about these plants. We asked these plants about their medicine. We did deep inner ecology of ourselves. We revisited our relationship with our infant self or with our child self. All these things, and then we were able to ask our child, like, tell us, what can you tell us about this plant? What's this plant's medicine? Or just seeing how your child reacts to this plant. Does your child like this plant or doesn't like the plant? Or, whatever it is. And so you're able to go back and use these very valuable pieces of yourself that have this incredible ability to perceive all manner of things. But it was only that we were out there and we didn't have to unplug from that and plug back into, I'm gonna drive home now, I gotta cook dinner, and because everything out there in the quote world, it's hugely invested in our energy, in our time and our attention. So it's like we're constantly being bombarded by stimuli everywhere that wants our attention. Yeah. And even in visible wavelengths, for that matter. My brother's an electrician, and he's really into like these the effects of like Wi-Fi signals and microwaves and radio frequencies and all that stuff that's just passing through us. So we can't hear it, we can't see it, but it's just going right all through us. And what is that doing? So it isn't until you have that moment where you're driving out in the middle of nowhere where you're like, oh gosh, this feels much better. Or, I'm just going to pull over right here and sit in this field and lay down, and you get a healing. You feel like you reconnected with yourself. And what did you do? Nothing. You just went out in the middle of nowhere. That's all. Yeah. So it's tricky, and then at the same time, that's marketed too. It's like, well, get back to yourself, return to your true self, and nothing against anything at all. But, it's like, read this book or take this class or meditate or do all these things. But, those are very kind of surface, superficial scratches to kind of see, like, is anybody awake in there? Right. And then you have to really kind of...
Everything's kind of a quick fix. And so I guess my question, I've got a question kind of along that same line then is, as someone who does practice the healing arts, is how difficult is it to reestablish that connection, I guess, in your mind? Is it something that, obviously it's something that can be done, but is it something that can be done quickly, or is it something that takes a lot? It's kind of like, kind of rebuilding that whole foundation for everything, right?
Yeah. Well, one thing that my wife, Rebecca, says is, she has this phrase, moving at the pace of permission. Now, that can mean your own permission as you're going deeper into the shadow parts of yourself, or as you're walking upon a land that maybe necessarily you are not a resident of, and moving carefully and moving quietly and moving consciously, and allowing that relationship to begin. And like anything, you can't anything that's worth a darn, you can't really rush or get overnight. Right. Just like a relationship with a human being, you can't expect to meet somebody, unless it's a very rare occasion, and talk to them for 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden, believe that you can put your life in their hands. Right. There's extraordinary cases, of course, but if you really want a relationship to have legs, to have pillars, to have longevity, sustainability, you have to build a relationship. So you have to build a relationship with nature. You have to build a relationship with yourself. You have to go through these processes, these meditations, these layers inside of yourself, and say, wow, why am I angry? I don't know. Let me take a look at that. How long have I been angry? When was I angry but I wasn't allowed to speak? When was I angry but I wasn't allowed to go outside and scream? Or when was I angry but I wasn't allowed to say, hey, I feel unsafe and, I need help, So a lot of it does take time, it takes a lot of time and a lot of care and a lot of gentleness and a lot of forgiveness and a lot of just getting to a place where you feel safe enough to do that work. Right. And a lot of times it's really helpful to have someone guide you through that, and that could be terrifying. So if you can get a launching point or a starting point, and if you can really decide, like, I'm going to make this a priority, I'm going to check in with myself once a week, I'm going to check in with myself once a day. I mean, that's a huge commitment. And you know, I think the reward of that is so much, you know, it's so much worth it. Just like anything, you know, if you want to be a master woodworker, or if you want to be a healing artist, or a baseball player, whatever it is, you can't just do it sometime.
No.
You make it a part of your daily life, your daily routine. It becomes your lifestyle. It becomes who you are. And a lot of times, it's also really helpful that it's not something that you're trying to do, but it's something that you're invested in emotionally.
Yeah.
You have a passion. It's coming from your heart. If it's coming from your mind because you think, well, I have to do this so that so-and-so will like me, or I have to do this so my parents will approve of me, or I have to do this because society thinks I should, well, that's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
But if it's something, a deep part of yourself that says, I can't breathe, I'm dying to if I can no longer not acknowledge this part of myself, or this side of myself, or this passion, and I'm willing to just do it at no cost. Like, that's kind of the place you want to get. And a lot of times that doesn't happen until we realize, we wake up one day and we're like, oh my gosh, you know, like, I'm married. How did I get married? You know, it's like the show, like, how did I get here? The song, you know, the Talking Heads song, whatever. But really, they're oftentimes is like this awakening.
Yeah.
It says, wait a minute, like, what am I doing, and why am I doing it? I know for me, that was huge. It was like, okay, I really need to think about where my energy's going, and be conscious about, am I giving that energy out? Right. Or is someone or something just pulling it out of me? And because I'm the one who gets to decide where my energy goes. But if I'm not paying attention, guess what? It's like there's magnets all around us, and they're all kind of pulling a little bit of that energy. You know, it doesn't have to be dark or evil or anything like that, but I think it does have to do with consciousness, and it does have to do with, well, what am I doing and why am I doing it?
I think a lot of people walk through life daily and don't know why they're doing most things. Mm-hmm. One of the big things that I enjoy doing is yoga. And one thing that I have found within the yoga community is that, I don't want to put a number on it, but I'll say 80%, if I had to, are just doing it because other people do it. Mm-hmm. They don't care to do the research on it or know the history of it or why, or like even where it was practiced at. The same with sauna. You know, when we looked into the sauna and everything, you know, why, like even where the sauna came from, you know, with tribes doing it, you know, and basically hot temples and hot tents and things like that, and the benefits of it. I think that as a society, with not only with like nature and a lot of, you know, ancient medicines, we've commercialized them. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, sure. One of the biggest things that it's good and bad at the same time, but one of the biggest ploys that the America ever did on things, and it's kind of the world now, not even America, is the national park services. You have to pay to go see nature. Mm-hmm. You have to, you know what I mean? You know, and they have conned people into saying like, oh man, you know, these are the most beautiful parts of the world. We have to go see them, right? But you got to pay. Mm-hmm. You got to pay to go see the world.
Do you really have to pay to get in national parks now?
Yeah.
I did not realize that.
Yeah. I had to get like a veteran national parks card
right. Yep.
to get in free. Yeah. And I mean, but if you really sit and think, if you really just take a step back and think about that, you know, you're paying people to go look at the world, not something that was, you know, man-made, you know, the world. You have to go pay to see that. And that I think that's like one of the biggest cons in the world. And you have people that donate money to it.
And unfortunately, a lot of those sites are sacred sites to indigenous peoples. And they knew something was going on there, right? So, yeah, unfortunately, that's a dirty thing all around. So.
Oh, it is. But we don't see it that way. You know, it's been warped that way. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with, you know, one of the with the healing arts. One of the things I was going to ask you about with, I don't want to mispronounce it, Reiki. Thank you. I always mispronounce it. You know, one thing when I was doing research on that before I came in was that, you know, it's been very Americanized as well. You know, there's added elements to everything. And one thing that I was reading an article that really threw me off was that there's like Christianity elements added into it now, which kind of takes away from the whole basic foundation of what it would be based upon to begin with. And so I just thought that was kind of funny and kind of played into what we were talking about, because I just think that the way that we view nature and just actually everyday life, we've kind of commercialized everything that we've done, and I'm guilty of it more. You know, I think that just in the world we live in, we're guilty of it, and it's just ironic more than anything when you sit and think about it.
Oh yeah. There's very little that escapes that influence.
Oh yeah.
And you know, if you can market it, you can make a living or exploit something, and unfortunately, you know, there's not a lot of good that comes from that. And you know, like my Uncle Jamie, you know, he used to call you know, some of the books that were out, you know, he'd say it's more like shelf help instead of self help. You buy the book and maybe you read half of it, you put it on your shelf, and you're like, hey, I'm aware of where my intentions are going. See, I've got this book, you know, it's The Secret.
Yes.
You know, The Secret was a big one, you know, and there's just really honest attempts, maybe they're honest attempts to let others know about, you know, the power of intention and things like that. But also there's like this huge marketing campaign around it, you know, and things like that. So it's really tricky, you know. Krishnamurti, I studied Krishnamurti for a while, and one of my favorite sayings of his is truth is a pathless land. And, you know, a lot of us really get intoxicated about finding the truth or finding ourselves or finding the meaning or whatever it is. And I think as human beings, we've always been intrigued by that. Unfortunately, well, boy, anybody, you know, as many people as there are on the planet, there are renditions of the truth.
Right.
A good thing and a bad thing, you know, in a way. The truth is your honest expression of you know, how you're living and how you believe things to be. But there's a lot of snares and people who are more than willing to tell you what the truth is.
Yeah.
And after they've done that, they want to tell you a few other things too, you know. So unfortunately, people get to this point where they are very scared, very terrified, but they want to know the truth, or they want to unlock this part of themselves. And they venture out and they say, I want to become more whole. I want to be a fully integrated human being. What do I need?
Yeah.
And so you can buy this book.
You can buy this.
Do this workshop that's $17,000 or whatever it is, and come out the other side, and you're really going to have it made, you know?
Yeah. I will say, I mean, because we're both huge readers, and I think that's a big thing. You know, the only when I was going through the whole like suicide thing, like, is my life kind of worth it kind of thing, that was the hardest thing for me. It was like I was looking for meaning. You know, it was kind of like I'm going through life, but I don't know why. And I didn't hate my life. I didn't hate what was going on. I just didn't. I felt like I didn't have I had a positive life. I had a lot of good things going for me, but I wanted to know more. I wanted to know why I was here. And I think once you kind of get past that and just live, a lot of that goes away. A lot of the resentment, I think, because that was my big thing, is I was always like, man, I can do more. You know, I mean, ask Jeff, like, I'm like, next summer I'm going to Peru. You know, I've gone to Italy 2 summers in a row. I'm going to Peru next summer. I gotta go do this. But then at the same time, I go do it for myself. But then I commercialize it. I put it on Instagram. It's a status symbol. It's look at me, I'm traveling. I must be knowledgeable. My podcast must be successful because I'm a world traveler. And I think once you kind of get away from that mindset and just do things for you. So what I've started doing with social media now is I think that I'm using it for myself, whereas I was using it for myself for other people. Sure. And I think that's a real basis of how we live life. I think that a lot of things we do may be for ourselves, but we're doing it to please other people, to them, but because that's what pleases us. But it's not. You're not really being fulfilled at that point.
Yeah, you know, a lot of times we get ourselves into these situations where we're doing things so that we can get acknowledgement from the external world that we're doing a good job.
Yeah.
And we're not wasting our days or wasting our time, or we're putting our education to good use, or we have purpose.
Yeah.
And that's one of the other terrifying things about being in the middle of nowhere, or having the ability to become silent, is that when it's just you, it's just you.
It's just your mind. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the journey inward. That's the truth is a pathless land.
Yeah.
The truth isn't out here, so to speak. It's inside of ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's the road that we must take if we want to truly understand who we are, what is authentic, what is our truth, and then how do we live it and share it with our community or our world. But until you know yourself, how can you possibly know the truth of anything?
Right.
You're either, I think it's great to be inspired by other people, and there are good things that happen there, and there's a balance that can be found with saying, hey, look at these cool things I'm doing, and sharing with people. Some people will say, hey, oh my gosh, that's awesome. It kind of gives them an opportunity. But to really do some real soul searching, I think a lot of that has to do with internal things. And once you get the inside right, then you can live, hopefully, your life more focused on your truth, on your purpose, on your gift that you have to share with the world, as opposed to saying, well, how is this going to be perceived? Or, does so-and-so approve of this? Or so-and-so thinks I'm crazy? Or X, Y, or Z? I think it starts when we're children. We want to have the approval of our parents or our caregivers. So we're willing to do pretty much whatever it takes to receive love from them, and an acknowledgement that we are a good boy or a good girl or whatever it is. So we really have to kind of break that mold and decide, like, what is good and right for us,
I was going to say,
all that stuff away.
Once my mom found out I was crazy, I really didn't care what anyone else thought. So that's that was kind of like, well, we're good.
Yeah.
We're good with it. Yeah, Jeff's a lot better at that than I am. He stays off social media. Mm-hmm. Just kind of.
It's just not my jam. I don't.
He's smooth sailing, man.
That's good.
No, I got
things to do.
I got other places to put my energy. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Andy, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, this was absolutely amazing. Thank you. We really appreciate you coming on, and
hopefully have you back again if you want to.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's do it tomorrow.
Definitely. Hey, well, thank you guys so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good night, guys. Thank you.